Hey, Mike Callahan here with the SimpleGrowth team. I've got Dillan, who's been working with us here for probably about the last year. And Dillan, I appreciate you coming on with us. But topic today is, are people really using their Service Autopilot 100%? Or if they're not using Service Autopilot, are they using their software that they're using 100% in their service business? So I know one of the instrumental things for myself when I went out to Service Autopilot's office and met Jonathan Toshnik of the Lawn Care Millionaire and Garrett Matthews and Chad Cranston, is that I actually went and flew out to Dallas to actually see how to use Service Autopilot to scale my business to that seven-figure mark and beyond. And I know obviously you running a seven-figure lawn care and snow removal business for quite a while now. Have had some experience with highs and lows of using software and having a fully set up software now, and then in the past probably not set up fully. So I appreciate you joining me, but if no one has met you or heard of you, would you mind just giving a little background, kind of pre-SimpleGrowth days, and then obviously now at SimpleGrowth, what you're doing?
Yeah, no, for sure. Excited to be here. Basically, I had a lawn care snow removal business for about 10 years in Northern Ontario, and kind of operated that as an owner-operator. 2019 actually sold the business and known Mike for a couple of years now, so I gladly came aboard to help the SimpleGrowth team. And kind of over the last year or so, diving into people's files, there was an issue that I had too, right? Service Autopilot is such a robust software, and lots of other softwares as well are very, very robust. And oftentimes you kind of get caught up in the minutia of the day-to-day operations of your business, right? So sometimes it really pays to take a couple steps back and see if you are using the software to your full potential. So most of the time when we're diving in, whether it's a really experienced company or a brand new company, they're sometimes a little bit overwhelmed and they want to know everything that's possible, but we kind of simplify it for them so they can use it effectively and hit the ground running. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're basically going to do is kind of paying it forward. So I had wished, like when I first started using Service Autopilot, that there was the ability to have a free audit. So we thought that since we've been doing these audits kind of behind the scenes now for the last 3 to 4 years, that it was really helpful for folks to hop on a call with the SimpleGrowth team as a certified advisor of Service Autopilot and say, hey, are you really using the whole entire software? Or are you part of the 10% club? Are you only using 10% of the software? And there's 3 main areas that we're really looking at in Service Autopilot in this analysis. And it's the actual setup of the system. Do you have a sales process, and how are you using the sales process in Service Autopilot? Is it fully set up? And then operationally, we'd want to go in and do an operational analysis. So Dillan, obviously you've been in the trenches of setting up and training Service Autopilot with us now. As far as the setup process of Service Autopilot, what are some of the key things that when people hop on a call with us, we really want to take a dial in and look at to make sure they're actually using the software fully set up?
No, for sure. So typically, actually, before we even get going with that, we kind of want to figure out what stage of business they're in, right? Because what might be really, really good for a new company, if you're a $5-10 million a year in an annual sales company, the same metrics don't necessarily apply, right? So typically we start off with actually what stage are you in? Stage 1 is typically $0 to $250,000 a year in sales, more of like a solopreneur. And then from there up to stage 4, which obviously you can go beyond this, but the stage 4 is like a 7-figure business and above, right? So before we dive into how set up you are, we kind of need to know where you're at historically with your business. The setup, though, the big things that we're looking at are, okay, do you have a website? Are you using social media? Are you using a CRM? Before we can even get going, we need to know that, right? We deal with people that are using Service Autopilot, other softwares as well. And then it might seem very, very basic, but are you using estimates? How many estimates are you sending out is typically where we start.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned estimates, just so I can interject for a second. One of the things I guess it was shocking to me, becoming a certified advisor and working with hundreds of Service Autopilot users now, is that I would say maybe 40 to 50% of the user base is actually only using the estimate feature itself. And that's one of the most powerful things, at least in my business, to go out and delegate these estimates to my office staff, or if you have a virtual assistant somewhere like Pink Collars, the ability to use estimates and tie into something like Maps Pro. So the ability to just have estimates that are predictable is a huge benefit. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Dylan, but outside of the things you've already hit on, what else are you looking at as far as that setup analysis that we really need to look at to make sure they're set up for success from day one?
Yeah, so to be able to send the estimates, obviously we kind of need to take a step back in a sense. You need to have your services properly set up. So that's kind of the first, alongside the estimates, that's one of the first things that we check. Do you have your services? Do you have your prices, your price matrices, and also your job costing information in the back end of that? That's a really underutilized portion of Service Autopilot for sure, that I would say the majority do not have that fully set up, believe it or not. The next thing that we typically go on is, okay, do you actually have a system for routing? Are you just kind of throwing them on the dispatch board or the waiting list? Or are you even routing and scheduling properly? We've dealt with companies that are really far in their journey, and they're actually not scheduling it properly, creating a ton of extra workflow each year, rescheduling their services and stuff like that. So there's some little hacks that you can do to really save yourself time when you're doing your service renewals and stuff like that as well.
And I'm glad you hit on that. So that was one of the biggest takeaways when we went out and met Jonathan, the co-owner of Service Autopilot there, is that the main reason of going there is I wanted to see, how do I get that office set up for the scheduling, the billing, the routing, and be able to scale and add 200-300 customers a year. And that was the biggest takeaway there. So when you go into an audit like this, Dylan and the team and myself are going to be looking at some things like, hey, not only do you have your route set up, but are all the key foundational pieces behind that set up to actually route? Because if there isn't certain addresses on, say, like the team level or the crew level, the software doesn't know where to optimize off of. So a lot of times, Service Autopilot will get a bad rep of saying like, hey, the routing doesn't work that great. It's not optimizing it. Well, if you don't tell the software where to start, which seems obvious talking about it now, but sometimes it isn't, it can't optimize off those points. So there's certain things that need to really be put in there. And I also glad you mentioned routing. So job time, basically drive time, effect cost, and job costing all need to have information on each employee. So we need to know what their hourly wage is, plus labor with labor burden for overtime and regular time. And those are the things that some of the things that we'll kind of get into and say, hey, if you don't have some of these key points, you're using maybe 40 to 50% of the software, but the next part of it is maybe some of the reporting and analysis. If you don't have any of those data points going in, none of that data points coming out. So you're not able to go out and systematically raise your prices with no emotion. You're not able to go out and say, okay, where am I getting the biggest cost for drive time? How can I utilize the software for Smart Maps or Maps Pro to actually go in and build marketing lists off the satellite imagery to go build that route density? But without knowing where you're losing money from having some of those key things in the software, there's no way you can go out and actually start building route density because you don't know where you're losing the most amount of money. And sometimes it's not as obvious as you would think. So I'm glad you brought that up. But after we're kind of doing a setup analysis, a lot of times sales processes inside Service Autopilot are missing completely, or there's some huge gaps. So would you mind kind of talking about the sales process analysis?
No, for sure. And each of these analyses that we're doing kind of build on each other, right? So the next one, like you said, is typically the sales process and how efficient you're really being. So usually the first thing that we look at is, are you even tracking where your sales are coming from? And just knowing where to find that information isn't quite enough. Service Autopilot and I'm sure other softwares as well have the capability of having that report sent to you in an automated way, right? So you don't want to rely on, Judy or whoever from the office pulling that report, bringing it up to you and actually analyzing it. You want all the key members to actually be getting that report in an automated fashion, right? So that's kind of the first stepping stone. Another thing, this is a little bit more advanced, but are you providing instant pricing to your customers? Now, we definitely have the ability to do that on your website for sure, but you can kind of also take this question in another way. if someone calls in, are you able to provide them a quote right on the phone? And that just basically is your estimating and your sales efficiency, right? For those really, really simple services that you really don't need to go to the property for, that's the most scalable method of actually being able to handle, like you said, adding 200, 300, 400, 500 customers in a season. You can't do that with one salesperson or two salespeople going to each house and trying to set appointments. They're not home, etc. Right? So those are kind of the two initial main things that we ask. Kind of going a little bit more expert as well, but these are really, really fundamental things that I wish I had set up when I first started my business. And once I did implement it, it really was like pouring gasoline on the fire. Was, are you following up on your quotes at least 5 times? I know obviously you're a huge proponent of this, but like 80%, give or take, of the sales close after 5 touches, right? So a lot of people have the mindset, at least that I've been dealing with when we're setting up their Service Autopilot and when we're dealing with them after the fact, is they think that if the customer is interested, they're going to get back to them, which just simply isn't true. People are so busy nowadays that you need to really be following up. And I'm sure most people are aware of our 20 days to close estimate follow-up. But sometimes even after the 20 days, these people are just so hard to get a hold of that typically when we got that 20-day to do that final follow-up, we would still follow up maybe once or twice after that. And we would close a considerable amount of those estimates. So you got to be following up at least 5 times. That's a major success point. And then, are you actually upselling at least 4 times per year? Once again, you don't want to be relying on someone from your office, maybe calling the customers or doing that. You want to have it in an automated fashion that you're upselling, whether it's an ancillary service or your main service, to all your customers who don't have that and your leads that don't have that. And then the kind of the final piece of the puzzle is, do you have a system where your employees are kind of bought in and they're also going to be upselling work for you? They have eyes on the property, usually at least once a week, sometimes more than that. They're going to be key stakeholders in the ability to have actual data from the property, where you're not just calling and saying you need this type of upsell. You're actually calling them with a specific issue with their property that's been reported to you by the crew.
And Dylan, you hit on some really important things there. So when you're going to set up a software such as Service Autopilot, you hit on being able to give instant quotes. So yes, you can set that up on your website through a Facebook Messenger bot, automated through Zillow, but really that's going to be your secondary or at the same time. But the main thing is we need to have something set up that we can do prices live over the phone. And during this audit, we may dive in and look at some of the services you're offering. Traditionally, what we're going to recommend is we sell our gateway services. So that's kind of like we get them hooked. It's something we can sell fast over the phone based on lot square footage, or if you're in the home cleaning industry, it's based on square footage of home. Then after that, we're going to go in, and you mentioned upsells. So now we're going to go out 4 to 5 times a year. That should be in the system. So we're going to start with our gateway services. We get them hooked. We prove the service. The value offer is there. And then we're going in and we're upselling 4 to 5 times a year ancillary services that continue to drive the client lifetime value. So that's really, really important there. So bringing it home, we've kind of talked about the setup analysis of the system, the sales process analysis. Probably the third and final thing that we recommend looking at is the operational analysis of the software and the business. So would you mind hitting on that, Dylan, before we bring it home? And once again, if people are watching live, if you have any questions, Dylan and I are here to happy answer those questions live. In addition, feel free to click the link in the comments area to get a free analysis with myself or Dylan live on a screen share. So as we're diving in, Dylan, the operational analysis, what things are we looking at in Service Autopilot to make sure they're not only using 10% of the operational features as well?
Yeah, and some of these initial points here are kind of touch on why it's so important to have everything set up from the get-go, basically. Because if you need to go back and adjust everything because you're not getting these numbers out at the end of the month or whenever that might be, it's pretty laborious. So the first thing that we normally see is, are you tracking your budgeted versus actual times with your crew? And then are you actually tracking that on a company level as well, right? You need to see the aggregate, but then are you kind of communicating those results with your team with no emotion and your team actually buying in, right? That's the most important thing. you need to have it done in a systematic way where this is being displayed, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks, and your team can see these numbers in a fair and consistent manner. The next thing that we typically ask, and this is a major metric no matter what industry, what business, what software you're potentially using, is are you tracking your churn, right? Churn and comparing that on a year-to-year basis is a really, really important metric. I mean, there's no point of doubling your sales each year if you're losing 50% of those customers, right? So that's a really good metric to be looking at, and you really need to have your eye on that.
And Dylan, as you mentioned, churn is cancellation, correct?
Yeah, so basically how much of your customers are actually leaving your company, right? The higher, the longer your customers stay and the longer the lifetime value of those customers, obviously that's a great metric and good for your business, but that's also a really important metric if you're looking to eventually ever sell your business as well. The next thing is obviously reviews nowadays are very, very important, right? One good review can sell you a lot of new work. Everybody's looking at the companies that they're going to be purchasing from beforehand online. So do you have an automated way where, you know, depending on the size of your company, have you received 25 5-star reviews in the last year? Right? That's kind of a good starting point to see. Now, that might be bad for a company that has 100,000 customers. That might be amazing for a company that has 100 customers, right? So it's all comparative, and that's why we start with which stage are you in your business, because the results vary depending on which stage you're in. And this is kind of my favorite one to ask. It's a little bit of a fun question, but as the business owner, are you working more than 40 hours per week in the business? And I know you were guilty of this. I was definitely guilty of this as well. And most people are, right? So it kind of gets that mindset going. What can you do, and what steps you need to take to hopefully work less than 40 business? I feel like that's a really good metric where you can really start to have a really good work-life balance.
Yeah, and I'm glad a couple key points there as we wrap this up, Dylan, is are you working more than 40 hours a week? So I guess my mission with SimpleGrowth to start this business, and actually SimpleGrowth wasn't a business that I decided to intentionally start. There was just such a need, and it was good to help people and overcome the pitfalls that I had in my business and my work-life balance. But my mission from the beginning is to help entrepreneurs, specifically service business owners, take their life back from their business. So that is, folks, in my mind, like, take a look in the mirror, and are you working 40, 50, 60 hours a week? It doesn't have to be that way. But I think from the foundational setup, your software, such as Service Autopilot, needs to be set up in these 3 key areas, because if not, you are doing double, triple, repetitive entry. You are going out and babysitting employees. You are going out and chasing bad reviews off the social media or Google or Yelp. So all these things that are driving your time away from you, if the software is set up foundationally from the beginning, it will start buying that time back and help you pull that time back. So last thing you hit on there, Dylan, was like customer cancellation. So what does it cost to acquire a customer? How long are they going to last? These are huge things, because a lot of people will come to us and say, well, Mike, I'm at $500,000 or $750,000 in sales. I want to be to $1 million or $1.5 million in the next so many years. Well, if you don't know what it costs to acquire a customer and how many estimates on average you have to do in order to get that customer, you're kind of throwing darts at that dartboard. So foundationally, if the operational analysis is set up right on the software, we can tell you with no emotion, based on door hangers, Facebook ads, whatever those are, how many estimates you need to get, how many on a percentage are going to close on average, and what's the cost per client. And then, Dylan, you nailed it. What's the client lifetime value? What's the value of that client? So customer acquisition to lifetime value. Those are things we need to do. And if the software is not set up right, we won't be able to do it. So as we're kind of bringing it to the end here, if people haven't seen it here, in the link, we've got this webpage here. It's got a video of myself kind of outlining what the audit is all about. And there's an area down here, Dylan, where people can actually go in and select some time for our calendars and get a free 30-minute consult, basically an audit of Service Autopilot. And if you're not using Service Autopilot, we've built this in such a way that we can actually do an analysis of your software that you're using. There's a lot of good ones out there, but are you hitting these points? And if you're not, this will give you a roadmap in your software that you're using to execute it. And if those things aren't available in your software, then it may be time to look at a different software platform that will give you the 3 core areas that we're going to do an audit in for success. So ideally, yes, if you use Service Autopilot, this is a no-brainer. Click the link down here and sign up for this free audit. It's 30 minutes, and we're going to rip through it. Now, Dillan, do they have to be on a screen share? Is it something we can do over a phone? What's the setup of that call look like, ideally?
Yeah, so it definitely does not need to be a screen share for sure. I mean, that's ideal, so you can see the questions as we're going through it. But I've done this with people while they're in a truck. You know, their employees are finishing up a job. We've kind of just ran through it quickly like that. It's not a formal call, and there's definitely no obligation either, right? Kind of going back to the foundation, whether you're a small business or a large business, just like you'd go maybe for like an annual checkup, doesn't hurt to see if there's anything you're missing, right? And being in the day-to-day grind of it, you can potentially have some blinders on where you don't see the full picture. Us being in the software, you know, every day, almost all day, we can kind of put together the pieces in a little bit of a different way. So yeah, no matter what size or how set up you think you are, it doesn't hurt to kind of dedicate 15 minutes just to make sure you're not missing anything. And yeah, book a time with probably myself and sometimes Mike, and we'll definitely, you know, let you know kind of where you're at and the results of this audit.
Yeah, and I'm really excited with that audit too, because it actually will give you a score in each area and highlight the pain points. So based on the stage of business, where's the most important part for that part of business? Is it getting leads? Is it sales? Is it upsells? Is it employee processes? Based on the stage of your business in this audit, we're going to be able to pinpoint, okay, maybe you have 2 or 3 different issues, but this is the most important one at the stage of business where you're at and where you want to go. So no matter the software platform, click the link below. We're happy to hop on. Ideally a screen share, but if you're still in the truck, there's no excuse. Block out 15 to 20 minutes of your lunchtime next week or 2, hop on a call with us and we can dial this out for you and shoot you an email with some results on it. But the idea is we want to go in, help you be successful in your service business. And the way to be successful foundationally is having a solid setup in your software. And if you're using Service Autopilot, we're going to really be able to lift the hood and dial it in and let you know what you need at the stage of business where you're at. As a certified advisor, who knows, maybe we can even dive in and lend you a hand if you need some help, or at least show you a video that we've already pre-built, or if we don't have it pre-built, make a video for you to show you how to do it yourself. So not really looking to sell you anything, we're looking to just help you as an advisor to help you take your life back from your business, and by doing so, having a strong foundation in your software. So make sure you click the link in the comments, hit the landing page that is going to be right here, and click that time to talk to myself or Dillan. And we also have a couple testimonials of some people who have actually gone through some of these trainings here, spent 2 days with us live in New York, what you can expect as far as the knowledge and skill set we bring to actually dissect it and do an analysis of your software. So Dillan, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up? Appreciate you spending some time and helping me out doing these analysis for people in the Service Autopilot ecosystem. Or if you're using another software, we have the ability to go in and give you analysis to see the key points you should be using in your software. And if those points aren't there or the features aren't there, maybe it's time to take a look at a software that does have those features.
Yeah, for sure. No, my only closing thought is definitely try to carve out, 15, 20 minutes. We can run through this analysis really, really quickly. You'll get a kind of a pulse on where you're at with your business, and then we'll also actually share this analysis with you. So you'll have a copy of it. You'll be able to see kind of what you either need to improve on or what you're doing really good on. So totally recommend spending the time to do it. It's a worthwhile investment for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll see everyone else every Friday, the SA Weekly Talk Show, where Cody Owen and I bring in industry experts and break down different facets of your business. But one thing we really don't talk about there at the SA Weekly Talk Show at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central is the foundational analysis of a software, what it looks like fully set up. So if you haven't had an analysis of your Service Autopilot, click the link below. Dillan and I are really excited to hop on, hopefully a screen share, if not a phone call with you, and get you a report of this analysis. So you know the biggest return on investment and pain points in your software setup for success. So we'll see you hopefully on a screen share or a phone call with Dillan and I soon. So click the link below and we'll see you. So Dillan, thanks again, brother.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.